Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Perfectly Imperfect podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Minnie, and I'm joined today with a very special guest. Welcome to the podcast, Natalie Rose. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Natalie Rose is a registered psychotherapist, coach, and eating disorder expert. You may know her from her wonderful Instagram page at Wake Up and Smell the Rose, where she shares her personal experiences with healing her relationship with food and her body and tips for those on the same journey. So, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today because this is a topic that I speak on a lot, and I've shared my personal experiences with my diagnosis of anorexia and anxiety and just struggling with my own mental health over the last few years and finding a lot of empowerment in sharing that and being vulnerable with others. So I'm so excited to have someone who has studied this in depth and, has this deeper understanding of the psychological element of this and who has made it your livelihood and your career to help people struggling and on the same journey. So thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. To start with my guests, I love to do a quick rosebud thorn practice just to kind of get to know each other and bring ourselves down into the present moment for a little bit. So rose being something that's positive in your life right now, bud being something you're looking forward to, and thorn being something that's maybe posing a bit of a challenge for you right now.
Okay, awesome. I like this question. I would say my rose is probably this phase of slowing down before I'm about to have my first baby, which is really exciting and also scary, but exciting. Like little things like setting up the room and like spending more time with my husband have been really nice. And then, okay, what's the next one? The bud. The bud is something that I'm worried about,
Or looking forward to something
looking
that's kind
forward
of
to.
growing and blossoming currently.
Okay, I would say I'm looking forward to, I guess, entering a new version of myself because let's be real, I don't think there's any such thing as bouncing back or staying the same or having the same life after you have a child. So I'm looking forward to seeing how things kind of evolve or how I change and kind of step into this new version of myself. And then the thorn is probably, I guess, the work aspect of it. Like all the things that I don't have figured out. Truly have no idea how I'm going to manage work, which I'm super passionate about. Like you said, I've made my passion my livelihood, and that is, I mean, it brings me so much joy, but I know that you can't put 100% into work and 100% into being a mom. So I'm nervous about that. I know there are things that I had intended to do, like batching content for my podcast or for Instagram or for TikTok. Haven't done a single batch. Like I'm barely keeping up with my weekly posts. So yeah, I would say that's my thorn, and I'm just kind of accepting it for what it is.
I mean, I think that's the best thing you can do. I don't relate to the having a baby aspect to it, but I definitely relate to having moments of my life where I want to get ahead and, stay on top of it all. But then life just happens and it passes quickly and things come up that you maybe need to prioritize. And I think just like meeting ourselves where we're at and trying to kind of come at ourselves with compassion of like, well, I'm just doing my best here. Like that's something that's been helping me through those types of moments as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say my rose. I'm actually currently in Paris, which I'm very happy to be here, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to travel a little bit this summer. So that's bringing me a lot of joy and reconnecting with some friends that I have in this part of the world who I don't get to see very often when I'm in the States. So that's bringing me a lot of joy, and also meeting new people, which has been a great experience as well. The bud I have right now is I'm learning French, and that's something I'm really excited to. It's been a dream of mine to learn a new language and kind of unlock. It feels like it's unlocking like another culture and another aspect to the world that you can't really unlock without knowing the language. So it's really cool to be also back in a classroom setting as well. And then Thorn, similar to yours in the sense that with the batching of content and, my day-to-day routine looking very different than how it was when I was back in New York City, where I lived more long term. Just trying to accept that my priorities are a little different. My days look a little different. I'm working at different time zones, and things kind of fall off the list sometimes, and that's really hard for me to accept in moments. And yeah, just kind of trying to stay calm and realize that I'm doing my best. But it's all good things to remind ourselves of.
Yeah, definitely. That's
Yeah.
really cool that you're in Paris. How long are you there for?
I'm here 6 weeks total. I got here end of May, and then I'm staying here through middle of July. And then I'll be in London for a little bit afterwards until beginning of August. And then I go back to New York in August. Well, I'd love to also hear a little bit more about your background and what inspired you to become a psychotherapist and eating disorder specialist. So, if you could tell us a little bit about what inspired that path for you, and feel free to add anything else like current favorite hobbies or any other fun facts about yourself you want to share with everyone.
Sure. Well, I guess like many coaches or therapists, I have my own history with struggling with body image and disordered eating. And I never really got support for it or help specific to food or body image. And I think that really drove my interest in finding answers, not just for myself, but also to support others. I didn't know that I wanted to be a therapist because I was totally disconnected from my own emotions, like didn't have very much compassion for myself or others, throughout my struggles, just because I think often when you struggle with things like disordered eating, which kind of stem from deeper things like depression or low self esteem and anxiety, your brain becomes very self absorbed because it's just so focused on fighting to figure out how to protect you and keep you safe. So I always felt shame around that, though, just not feeling like I was a nice person or cared about others and things like that. And so I think like throughout my journey and just getting to know myself on a deeper level, that's really helped open up a lot of compassion and help me understand why I was the way that I was, why I struggled, where my struggles came from, and just kind of ultimately found myself in a therapist role. And now it makes so much sense. But I didn't know. I studied psychology because I was pretty much interested in figuring out what the heck was going on with me. And then it morphed into that. It's kind of interesting because while I was doing my master's in clinical and counseling psychology, I started a blog on Instagram. So I'm not sure like when you came across Wake Up and Smell the Rose, but it started off as a food blog, just sharing my breakfast and kind of sharing my experiences with overcoming chronic dieting and like trying to balance my eating and finding health and wellness. And I attracted a following of individuals who also struggled with similar things, like whether it was that dieting wasn't working or they were restricting and then experiencing symptoms like binge eating. There's like a lot of aspects to my story. So that kind of reminded me how passionate I was about food and healing, specifically that my relationship with food and with my body and guiding others through that. So then I kind of merged the two. I was becoming a therapist. I decided to specialize in body image and disordered eating and worked in private practice for a while, often with people, from all ends of the spectrum. There's such a huge spectrum. There's really severe eating disorders. And then there's, maybe someone who's never even had an eating disorder, but just struggles with their relationship with food. So I've had a lot of experience with that. And ultimately, now I work mainly with women who are either further along in recovery or maybe have never been received a diagnosis at all, but are really wanting to heal their relationship with their body and with food, sort of recognizing that a lot of our food issues stem from body image issues, which stem from self-esteem and self-worth. So that's kind of how I landed in this role.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I found you as well when I was in sort of the depth of my struggling and at the beginning of my recovery. I found your account along with some other ones that really helped me find support and find empowerment in basically changing the trajectory of the rest of my life. And although it's difficult, although it felt uncomfortable, although it felt impossible at times, seeing people like yourself and pages like yours just invokes that motivation and that support and that empowerment in the healing, in the discomfort. And yeah, I think that's so beautiful that have been able to take your pain and your struggle and turn it into something to help others. So I'd love to hear more about your approach as well, and what is your approach when you're helping people navigate their relationship with food and their relationship to their bodies and themselves.
Yeah, I would say we honestly spend less time talking about the food or our bodies and more time talking about our histories and our core beliefs and why food in our body became so important or dangerous or threatening or untrustable. I don't know if that's a word, but like it really, there's so much underneath the surface that often gets missed, especially in mainstream social media. Like you can't really go that deep over Instagram. You can share certain things, but at the end of the day, the struggle comes from really our beliefs about ourselves and, our value and our worth. And that can come from so many different kinds of experiences. And so we usually are talking through those experiences, building up who we are underneath it all. So, like, something that I hear often from clients is like, well, I don't know who I am if I'm not thinking about meal prepping and like healthy eating, or if I'm not known as the fit one or the healthy one or the thinnest one in the room. And that can be really scary because you kind of feel like maybe this emptiness or just like this huge void of ambiguity. And so we work through a lot of that of like, well, what else interests you or inspires you, or what might you like or what don't you like? Just kind of exploring who we are beyond our bodies and food.
I think that's so important and was definitely a big struggle in my own journey for sure. There was a big phase for me of not really knowing my identity, like outside of my eating disorder, and who am I if I'm not thinking about these things, if I'm not striving for these things. What advice would you give someone who's maybe struggling with that as well? And are there, I mean, for myself, I really, like you mentioned, tried to really take note of the small things that brought me joy, that brought me peace, that brought me, like some sort of connection back to my authentic self outside of my eating disorder. And the more I did that, the stronger that voice got and the quieter the eating disorder voice got. But what else would you say to help someone navigating that confusion and ambiguity of identity?
Yeah, I love all those things. I can relate to that as well. Like just finding peace in things outside of ourselves. I think that community is really important because we actually learn a lot about who we are through our relationships with other people, with safe people. So finding a community of people who understand or leaning into people maybe already existing in your life who you feel like you can be yourself around. Like you don't have to put up a front, you don't have to be a certain way to feel like they accept you. And sometimes, people have that, and sometimes that's non existent. And so just kind of offering hope that it's possible to form new relationships, trying new things. I know in my journey, it was all about saying yes to a lot of things, because disordered eating can be so isolating. It kind of like your routine becomes your whole life, and then you feel like it's like the more wrapped up you get into it, the more disconnected you are from other things and other people, and then the more attached. It's like such a vicious cycle. So, saying yes to new things and just being open. I think this is really hard for people who struggle with perfectionism because often, like, we don't like being bad at something that we're new at, or just not knowing, not feeling like we have steady ground. So trying new things can be hard, but that just kind of pushes you that extra step to break through that perfectionism and just be okay with not being, great at something and just trying something new, being open to new experiences. And through those experiences, you could either meet new people or you could just feel proud of yourself for challenging yourself. And you're now getting that pride from something other than the number on the scale or how you look in the mirror or what outfit you're wearing or how many calories you're eating. So it's kind of like about exploration. I always encourage that.
I love that. I'm nodding along because I feel like those are the things exactly that have helped me so much in my journey as well. So I love that you brought all of those things up because, like, the saying yes and the trying new things and the finding pride outside of elements that are defined by your disorder. And it's really tough to make that shift after however long you have been having certain thought processes and patterns of, oh, I feel proud about myself if I do X. But the journey, although uncomfortable and it brings a lot of discomfort, it's so worth it in the end.
100%.
And going off of what you spoke about, kind of leaning into your community and potentially expanding and exploring with your community, a question that I get a lot from my audience is how to navigate friendships and relationships throughout recovery or, it's dealing with an eating disorder. And I've shared that I have had friends where throughout my recovery I didn't necessarily feel safe or supported in the ways that I need, and that resulted in a loss of some friendships and a shift in a lot of friendships. And I've had a long-term relationship with my partner throughout my recovery, so it's definitely ebbed and flowed a lot in my own experience. But what would you tell someone maybe feeling alone or struggling with navigating relationships during their own healing and recovery journey?
I think it's really hard when the people in your life, they don't understand what you're going through and maybe don't know how to support you in the way that you need. And I think just validating that's not that there's something wrong with you. It's just that what you're going through is something that they could never understand. And I think it's complex. Like sometimes relationships end and sometimes they become distant for a while and then strengthen maybe further along in your recovery. Or sometimes you learn to not lean on them for certain things. They can still play a role in your life in certain ways. Like it really depends on the relationship, but I think kind of goes back to community. I don't think that I would have made as much progress in my healing if I hadn't had some kind of mutual understanding with others who were going through the same thing and offered hope and support. And I think that, even if it's not like a formal community, like for example, the one that I have now or that I host, but something like through, like you said, Instagram pages at the very least sort of gives you this feeling like you're not alone, even though it's kind of disconnected in the sense that it's over social media. I felt like that really kickstarted my journey and gave me hope throughout. One kind of special part in recovery too could be, again, like through exploring new activities and things like that, you could also meet new people. And I think brand new relationships can be really exciting because you get to show them what you want to show them or who you want to be, and not in an inauthentic way, but in a way where you're kind of starting fresh, both in that relationship and then also in yourself. And say you connect with that person on certain things, then you get to strengthen those parts of you, and you're not known for having the eating disorder, or you're not known for the things that you're trying to actually step away from. So I think though that would be sort of my advice is like being open to trying new things, meeting new people, even if it doesn't blossom into a friendship, because it's hard to make friends. You know, it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's possible, but it's not easy. Just interacting with someone and sharing other parts of yourself that have nothing to do with the eating disorder could be really healing and can help you feel less alone, at least in those moments.
Yeah, I resonate with a lot of that. And even I think going back to my point of like meeting new people in Paris, although I'm quite far in my recovery and I feel very confident, that was even something I was thinking about the other day of just like these are new people and I'm able to show up in whatever way and express what feels authentically interesting to me and authentically like I want to share and talk about with them. Like you said, it's not to say that I'm putting up an image of someone who isn't myself, but it's meeting new people and putting yourself in new situations gives you that opportunity to kind of reflect and be like, oh, well, I don't necessarily have to show up in this way because that's how we've always interacted. This is a fresh new start with a new human being to build a new connection. And I just think that's a beautiful and wonderful experience for anyone, whether you're going through recovery or not. But I think especially if you're dealing with going through recovery and healing and struggling to find that identity and strengthen relationships, like I don't know, even just like complimenting strangers, that was something too that I pushed myself to do, and not being afraid to be perceived and seen in public and observed by the world at large, and just kind of putting myself in those uncomfortable situations, like you said, can really help build relationships. They may not become your best friend, but it's still very helpful. So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can learn a lot from other people too. Like, even if you are in that phase where you're like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, I don't have any interests, I don't know who I am, you can learn about the possibilities through other people. I think I liked that most, seeing what other things people are interested in and getting ideas from that, or seeing if they were passionate about something that was kind of inspiring, because I felt like I never had any passions outside of, I guess what became a passion at one point, like exercise or eating healthy or whatever. But so, yeah, I think it's at the very least you could get inspired by people, and that could be a cool experience in itself.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just being curious too, kind of asking questions. And at least that's what I'm doing a lot right now. Just like, how do you live your life? What interests you? And it's such a beautiful element of life just to be able to interact and expand your perception of how this life can be lived, when disordered eating and rigid rules can make that view so small. Doing things like this can really help open it back up. And another question that I get asked a lot is kind of the start of eating disorder recovery. And no two people are going to experience it the same way. But if you had any advice and anything that you maybe share with your community and with your clients who are wanting to start but not really knowing how or when or in what way, what would you tell them?
That's a good question because, like you said, everyone's experience is so different. Everyone's needs are probably going to be very different at that very first stage. Probably finding at least one person you can trust, like whether that's a medical provider, a therapist, a dietitian, or a support person who has been in recovery or has recovered. I feel like you kind of need some kind of stability in the very beginning, like someone that you can ask questions to, learn from, and kind of just they can help start walking through the journey. But yeah, it really depends. Like if depending on the eating disorder, depending on, a person's mindset or state of mind or state of health. I think, we always need to be nourished first. Like we need to have a healthy body before we can have a healthy brain and mind. So if someone is really struggling in that sense, then the first step would be reaching out and finding a qualified dietitian, not just any dietitian, not a healthy nutritionist or whatever, not someone you just find off Instagram because you like their videos, but someone who's really, really qualified, and that way you know that you can trust them with recovery. I know recovery can be really scary, but that first step is usually somewhere along the lines of nourishment.
That's so key because all the other elements of body and brain function come from having that enough energy in your body. I know for me that was very, very important at the beginning of my recovery, and it's still something I tell myself and practice every day, just knowing that I can't go to my French class, I can't laugh with my friends, I can't walk around Paris if I don't have that baseline. And yeah, that's really important. So I'd also love to know, what is a non-negotiable in your daily routine that helps you either self-care or balance or ground yourself, or maybe all of the three? What is something that you find, a practice, a ritual that does that for you?
I think for the longest time, it was my morning routine. I would wake up, I would get some sunshine, I'd go for a walk, my morning walk. I'd have my big bowl of oatmeal. I'd, maybe do some stretches and set an intention for the day. I will admit that I don't have anything remotely close to that right now. I wake up late, I go to bed late, I wake up late, I sleep in. I have found that just during pregnancy, I've needed so much more sleep than usual. And so I just try to lean into that. And I'm very fortunate to have flexible hours and flexible mornings where I can do that. But I would say a new non negotiable that has come up over the past couple of years is reading in bed at night. Like, I almost feel like if I have finished my book and I don't have another book waiting, like there's no point in going to bed. I'm not motivated to go to bed, to go to sleep. I find it so relaxing to get lost in a story before bedtime. I also stopped scrolling before bed. I still scroll. I still spend way too much time scrolling in the day, period. But I stopped using my phone as an alarm, and I bought one of those like manual alarm clocks beside my bed. So that just kind of gives me like a degree of separation from my phone before bed where I can actually wind down. And then I keep my phone upstairs so I don't have that like stimulation, because that was keeping me up at night. And then, when you can't sleep at night, it kind of really throws off your whole day. So yeah, I just find so much peace in keeping my phone upstairs, going to bed, opening up my book and reading and escaping into that book. And it makes me sleepy. And then I sleep a lot better. So I would say that's my current non negotiable.
I love that non-negotiable, and I feel like that's something I'm a natural by my circadian rhythm. I'm a night owl, so I tend to have my creative bursts of energy late at night editing content and then go to bed too late, but still equally kind of have that anxious wake up of like, oh, I have to get up early. So I'm working on my sleep schedule. And yeah, that's something I've been very much considering. And I think when I return back to New York, I will invest in an alarm clock. It's good to hear that that's been something really, really helpful for you. Because, the blue light at night, I don't know exactly the brain chemistry and the psychology of it all, but it really is not good. Your brain isn't able to shut down in the way that reading a book can. So, yeah, definitely something I'm working on as well. And another question that I love to ask all of my guests, with the podcast being called Perfectly Imperfect, what does showing up imperfectly mean to you?
Showing up imperfectly to me means not having over prepared. I don't know. I mean, for example, even with podcasts, right? Like, I could have spent a lot of time preparing for this, and maybe I would have done a better job or had more curated answers, but I just like to challenge myself to practice being open and natural and neutral, and even building that skill. I think, for me, I've always been insecure about speaking, whether it's doing a presentation in front of the class at school, or doing a live event for work. It's always been something that I'm insecure about, but at the same time, if I didn't use my voice, I wouldn't have created my platform or have, the business that I have now, the community that I love so much and that I'm passionate about. So I think there's so much strength in just showing up, being okay with being different from the ideal version that you've kind of dreamt up about yourself. And it really can take you so much further than being that curated version. So, yeah, just not over preparing might be one way that I would practice showing up imperfectly.
Yeah, I love that. I relate to a lot of what you spoke on. And actually, I started my podcast for a similar reason of hating the sound of my voice and feeling so insecure in speaking, and that I couldn't speak well or eloquently. And I felt like the podcast was a healthy challenge in that way for myself, to just be like, I'm going to yap on mic for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and put it out into the world, just to prove to myself that I have a voice that can be heard, and I have thoughts worth sharing. So I love that we relate on that element of the podcasting. It's such a special way to share your story and connect with your community, I found. Is it for you?
Yeah, totally. And I went into it with the same intentions too, just challenging myself to connect with people on a deeper level, even if, like you said, I could have so many judgments flying around of like, oh, I don't sound like this person. Or when you hear someone else's podcast, I wish I spoke, quickly like they do. And it's, those judgments are still there, but I just don't latch onto them anymore. They're fleeting. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do what is bringing me joy or fulfillment or purpose. And thoughts are just thoughts. And then when you get feedback and you do connect with other people, it makes it all worth it. It's like, oh, yeah, I do have something valuable to share. So it's a cool experience.
Yeah, such a special experience. Well, thank you so much for answering all these questions and sharing your knowledge. If people want to find you, where can they find you? And I will, of course, put all your links and socials in the description below, in the show notes below. But if people want to find you, if people would love to work with you, where can they find you?
So I'm on socials as Wake Up and Smell the Rose, ROSAY. And you can find me at wakeupandsmelltherose.com/membership if you'd like to work together. And then I also have my own podcast, which is called Wake Up with Natalie Rose.
I will, like I said, link everything down below. Thank you so much again, Natalie, for coming on the podcast and being willing to speak about your experience. I really appreciate your vulnerability and openness here in this space. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for allowing me to have this conversation. Like you said, I love sharing. I love talking about it. So, yeah, thank you.